There's so much going on in the world today, be it globally, be it nationally, and now even what's happening at state level is impacting so many of us. Pooja, I want you to join me in this conversation about how do we as parents start to navigate that. But first, before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this work? And then we'll dive into the what do we do?
Amazing. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you so much for having me here. Um, I got into this work because I started as a public defender at the Legal Aid Society in New York, in Brooklyn, New York, and as an anti-oppression facilitator now, I started doing that anti-oppression work a long time ago, and it really came into focus as a public defender, where you see oppression everywhere you look, in every ruling, in behaviors, attitudes, and especially in our language, the language that we use to represent our clients, to make bail applications, to even just liaise or talk with officers in the courtroom. Everybody is vying for a little slice of power in the criminal court setting. Um, and when you are in such an oppressive system, a lot of times we use oppressive language as kind of like the chips we're trading with to get that slice of power. So I got really familiar with oppressive behavior and language, racist, transphobic, classist, a lot of sexual harassment, and you never get used to it, but you always have to be very careful to not get used to it, and so that you don't start adopting back what you are rejecting out front. So
Yeah.
after about 7 years, I started Boundless Awareness, and our tagline really is, what do we unconsciously perpetuate that we consciously reject?
Mm, mm.
All of us are going to say, I don't, I'm not, I'm not racist, I'm not classist, I'm not sexist, I'm not misogynist.
I'm the ableist. Yeah, all of the things.
All of the things, and we are still unconsciously perpetuating it.
Yeah.
No matter
It's
how.
interesting. So didn't mean to cut you off, but like as you're talking, it's interesting to me because so much of this conversation has paused right now, right? Because there's this whole anti-DEI effort, and so people don't want to talk about these things. But I always look at it as even if the conversation's not happening in the forefront, the work to dismantle, the work to continue these isms is still happening. And we can see that in what's happening in Tennessee right now.
Mhm, mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and so what I'm really kind of grappling with and why I started, with like this ties into parenting is, there's this mindset that we need to protect children from kind of the evils of the world. But at the same time, oftentimes children are actually victims of what's happening in the world, and some children don't have that privilege of being protected because they are individually impacted by what's happening. But at the same time, you want to hold on to the innocence of children. So I'm kind of going back and forth in this work that we do, and how do we bring it into our homes? Like that's the after five piece, right? We talk about so much of this at work, and so many people are trained to have these conversations
Right.
in the workplace. But then we go home and it's just like, oh, I don't want to have these conversations at home. But that's actually where the meat of the work needs to happen. And so, how do you start to bridge that gap between what we hear from 9 to 5, right, into our everyday homes, our lives, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think we tend to think in binaries
Mm,
that a child is innocent or not, or don't expose your child to XYZ. Meanwhile, you are of course exposing your kid to all sorts of things. We don't live in this vacuum.
Mhm.
And yet we think we do, like, oh, I don't want to talk about um, anti-trans legislation and attitudes and beliefs that are like promulgating all throughout the United States over the last 10, I mean, forever, but there's been such a high focus on it the last 10 years. Um, because I don't want to expose my children to what? Like what, these
Right.
aren't reasons, they're excuses. They're excuses not to participate in the work, and it's because we ourselves are not fluent, or we don't have enough confidence in our fluency
Mm.
to bring these topics. Kids are gonna I have 2 kids, and they're both under the age of 8, and if you don't start practicing these things today, you're not going to be where you want to be in a year or two from now.
Mhm.
You are starting your habit building now. And it's not about the kids, it's about you. It's about me, it's about us as parents, of what muscles are we working. You don't go to the gym just once if you want to build muscle or whatever your goal is. You go time and time again. We exercise our bodies every day if we can, uh, because that's the body needs that consistency to function. So it's the same thing with these habits. It's not about our kids, it's about us. And let's not
Mm.
fool ourselves or like make this excuse that our children aren't ready or they're innocent or any of these things. They're being, as you just said, they're being affected right now.
Yeah.
And we're
And they're
not there every
smart.
day, like 24 hours a day. We have no idea what they're being exposed to.
Well, and I was just gonna say they're so smart, it's
Yes.
and I think there's a naivete of parents thinking, oh, if I protect them in this bubble, if I put them in this bubble, then I'm doing all that I can. A kid will get on a phone and do research on their own and
Right.
go down this rabbit hole that makes the parent even more ill prepared, right, to respond to, because now they have some research behind them. Um, and so it's like, how do you, and you articulated it so perfectly. The fear is within the parent because they don't have the language, or they have not thought through their feelings or their stance on something in particular. And so because they don't have that knowledge base, we're not going to bring that up. We're not going to talk about that. Um, and I'm a huge fan. So folks know that watch the show, listen to the show. My How I fill my cup is I watch comedy, right? Sitcoms on television,
Yeah.
and I love The Neighborhood. And there was this one episode where they were trying to bring in a new history book that was more inclusive, and there was a parent that, my child doesn't need to know about this, doesn't need to be exposed to this, bring back the old book or I will
Yeah.
pull my dollars away from the school.
Mhm.
And how they played that whole thing out, what ended up happening, it was the kids that said, you're afraid of this history, it's not us, we want to learn. And so I think it was very powerful because I think there is this notion of the innocence, the protection of kids. These aren't old school kids. Like, these kids are built differently. And so in many ways they're smarter than parents when it comes to these issues, these topics. These are when I talk about generations in the workplace, it translates outside of the workplace, right? This is a generation that is more globally connected. They know what's happening um, 5,000 miles away,
Yeah.
more so than they know what's happening in their backyard.
Yeah.
So, how do you try to damper that? And I don't think that you should. I think that it's, how do you ask the right questions so that the kids are making sure that they're well informed on all sides, so they can then come up with how they want to see a particular issue. And that's guiding them through that process. So the
Oh,
question then is,
mhm.
how do we equip parents with how to ask the right question?
Yeah. Yeah, I always love questions that start off with "I wonder." Uh, for example, they just finished this unit at school on what they call westward expansion,
Mm.
but what we would call
Colonization.
colonization, genocide,
Right.
spread of disease,
Right.
enslavement. Um, and so they had a whole, and um, okay, let me get to that in a second. I think there's some anniversary of Lewis and Clark.
Mm.
Okay, and those are two names that like fly off our tongue because that's what we were taught.
Mhm.
We don't say Lewis, Clark, and Sacagawea. We don't say that. We say just Lewis and Clark, as if like they like did
They
it
just
themselves.
figured this out on their own.
Yeah, like how all of these like inventions that were thought of and imagined by anybody who's not a white man. A lot of those inventions get stolen and then
Mhm.
passed off as the idea of the person who stole it, and the credit goes to them. So she just finished this unit at school, and so during the unit, they have to read these things or some reading comprehension. She reads this passage and has to answer questions on it. So I read the passage, every night we're going through the homework, and I looked at it, like I had like the piece of paper in my hand. I'm reading this. I read the whole thing. It's about westward expansion, and yeah, uh, there's one line about the tragedy to indigenous peoples through the plains where they were traveling. Yeah, so there was, and there's one line that mentions a trail of tears. So one line, and this thing was 4 pages long. I was like, "You're reading 4 pages? You're in second grade. What is happening?" So anyway, she reads this whole very long essay, very dense with information, 2 lines about indigenous peoples. And I was so shocked. I looked at it and I just like kind of tossed it onto the table. I said, "This is propaganda." And my kid is like, "What's propaganda?" And I was like, "This isn't even what happened. Like, I can't believe, I had such a, I mean, I don't hold back with my kids. So, if I'm feeling something, I just kind of say it. And, I wasn't like, well, propaganda is the spread of misinformation by the system. I didn't
Right.
go there. I was like, they're just not telling you the whole
The whole
story. Like,
story. Right.
who is focused on in here? And like who's like the main character in the story? And I look at her and she's like, well, Lewis and Clark were expanding westward. I was like, please don't say that. Like they were remember we talked about, and like I bring up all of these other examples of course I talk about colonization at home. So I just bring in the different countries
Right.
that she's already familiar with, and I was like, that happened here, but it happened in the country that we call like our home, quote unquote home right now. And anyway, so I used that sentence, I wonder. I said, I wonder how they got through all of these quote unquote trying times. I wonder what the role of Sacagawea was. I wonder what her life was like. Why don't we
Mhm.
look it up?
Mhm.
And so then and they're under the age of 8, so I don't really bring screens and phones and stuff like that out. But I had to because I don't know all the answers. So I was like, I wonder what the answer to my question is. I don't even know. So then we learned Sacagawea had, there was a lot of horrific things that happened to her.
Yeah.
That she was alone. She was without her community. She went through a whole pregnancy. She gave birth. She carried her like alone. What are these two people
Alone.
what are Lewis and Clark gonna do to help her out? I wonder.
Right.
I wonder what Lewis and Clark did to help her out after, like, I wonder if they cut the cord. I wonder if she had to do it herself. I wonder who possibly could have helped her. Did she meet other people there? Like, I've been through a pregnancy. I have given birth. I can't even imagine doing it alone with these two dudes hanging out. Like, what is happening?
Yeah. But I think you gave a great example of parents don't have to have all the answers, right? And I say that to leaders all the time. It's part of the part of what makes leaders amazing is that they are very human. And so I don't know the answer, but let's learn together. Right. And I've had leaders to do that. And I think that that's such a big part of parenting. Like parents should have all the answers. I'm sorry, this might not be, this might be your first time parenting. This might be a topic that you've never had to deal with. What is wrong with learning together? And I think that that is such a huge part of the process. And I was kind of giggling a little bit at that story because we took our boys and my mom to the Museum of the American Indian a couple of years ago. And again, I grew up in Virginia. So, knowing tribes and knowing kind of the Virginia story and
Mhm.
Pocahontas. And I went to school in Colonial Williamsburg, so that tells you all the things. But
Mm.
this was the first museum I ever went through that I left pissed. And it was because this is the story you are told in school. They did a timeline, like you're walking through, and then this is how the indigenous communities documented what was happening, right? So when you talk about the Trail of Tears, yeah, there was the Trail of Tears, like that one sentence, but they really went down into what was happening during the Trail of Tears. And I think as a parent, it was one of those things to, how do I process this? How do I unlearn some of the things that we've learned, right? Lewis and Clark, yes. And hold space for that, but then also know there's another side to the story. Because typically, who tells the story is who is considered the winner,
Mhm.
right? And so, how do we force ourselves? And I think that this country is going through a lot of this right now, of this cognitive dissonance on what is real and what is not, and what is the story that we've been told about the great American, what's the word, dream,
Mhm.
and the nightmare and horror that it's been to so many people. Right. And so, how do you sit in that as a parent to be able to say yes and right? And I think that's the discomfort, because a lot of that is fighting or questioning what we were taught to believe to be true, versus those of us kind of in this work that have learned to ask those questions,
Right.
and to challenge the status quo, can look at it from other angles to be able to be comfortable enough to say, yes, this is what is documented, but this is not what was documented, right? This is what we know to be true. This is what we know to um, have happened, right?
Absolutely.
And how do you bring those together? And so, what I'm hearing you say is, let's not just check the box of this is what my child is supposed to learn. And because it's outside of my wheelhouse, I'm not going to challenge that. It's this is what my child's supposed to learn. It's not in my wheelhouse. How can we challenge this? How can we look at it from a different angle? And how do I deal with my discomfort in that process?
Yeah, that's like I feel like you just outlined like your next book. Like it's like chapter by chapter. And I feel like also, we don't need to be subject matter, what is it called? Subject matter experts.
Experts, right?
We just want to teach our children like this is what an assumption is. I feel like that's the biggest lesson you could give to your kids
Yeah.
because all these conspiracy and lies and misinformation happens because we believe the underlying assumption. And if you can't identify what that assumption is, then you have no critical thinking way of getting through that misinformation. So, my fr- and I, um, like when you're taking the LSAT and stuff and you're like formally learning what an assumption is, and then you have to identify it in the test, like um, i- if gosh, that would have been so much easier if I just learned what an assumption was before I took the LSAT. But
Yeah.
if I can, if all you have to say is like, I wonder which side of the story is missing.
That question right there, I think is key, right? Um, because it forces that thought process, right? Whose voice is not being heard? Whose story is not being told? Like those questions, I think can open up so many doors. And if you're like, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know, go research that. Go dive deep into that. You know, because when you talked about assumptions, the first thing that you're taught, and I realized this not too long ago, like when you assume you make an ass out of you and me, ha 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 ha.
Mm-hmm.
People think that's the definition,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
no, that's not how you define assumptions. So, how do we, oh, and I've been talking about this with some of my clients, how do we get to that next level of
Yeah.
questioning, right?
Yes.
Not the superficial, like what's the next level? What are the five whys? How do you deepen the curiosity in this space? And I think as a parent, so many folks are so busy, and we're all busy, um, that you don't want to take that time. But what are you losing in not taking that time to dive deep with your child, right? And do that research. Um, yeah, my wheels are turning right now because I'm like even thinking when you mentioned Sacagawea, I'm like, I think I have a book about her upstairs. Like my mom gave me this
Amazing.
whole series of books from when I was a kid about all of these people of color that had impact on the country, and something told me to hold on to it. And so it's in one of my boys' rooms, and one of them is Sacagawea. But I mean, we have like Charles Drew, and I mean, there's just so many books, and it's how do we tell those other stories, right? You hear about what Ben Franklin and the light bulb,
Okay.
but the guy that did the filament was a black man that was his apprentice, right? But we don't know it. Like I used to know his name. I don't remember his name now. But it's those stories, as you said, they get erased in telling and in highlighting, right, the supremeness of whiteness.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
Right. The myth
Yeah.
of that supremacy. Yes, indeed. Can we get a link to that set of books, please?
I will see if I can find it because these when I tell you these six suckers are old, they are old.
Great.
But
I want
I
to
will
find them
I
too.
will see if I can find it.
Maybe my
Yeah.
library has it. Yes,
Oh
yes.
my
Please
gosh.
send it. Please send it.
Well,
Um,
Pooja, I was gonna say, I think this has been a great conversation, and we probably have to do a part two to this because I mean, there's just so many things that I think we could talk about, but
yeah.
looking at parenting from this perspective of how are we the stewards of expanding the education of our children, how do we step into that role, I think is a critical one that so many overlook because they assume that the school system is going to do it. And if you are not blessed to be in a school system that has a holistic view of learning and education and all of those things, then we miss out. And that is why we are in our country is where we are right now, because there's a lot of assumptions that took place that the education was whole and correct. Um, and lots of things have been left out so that we are ill equipped to deal with what's happening today. So
Yeah.
thank you.
There's two books that we have at home that have helped in this way. One is, and they're a little older for my kids, but we're like working through it together. Like once a week,
Mhm.
we do a chapter. And the first one is Lies My Teacher Told Me.
Mm,
And which is advanced. Like I'm not going to tell a 7-year-old how to, oh, here, go read this book. It's hard, but we do it together. And the second one is Howard Zinn's Young People's History. It's
okay.
like the people's history of the United States. So like he has like one for adults, and then he has like a young people's history. granted, it should be for teenagers, but we are doing one chapter a week at our house. So like tonight, my wife said, tonight's the night we're going to do one chapter. You pick whatever chapter that interests you in this book. And we're going to translate it, kind of make it decipherable for you. And we're going to have a discussion on it.
I love it. I love it.
So
Because that's how you do it, right? The education has to be at home. The education has to be within the community. Because sadly, it's not happening in our school system.
Indeed.
So, Pooja, thank you so much for being with us. We will absolutely have you back because, again, there were so many rabbit holes that was go down in this process. But no, thank you, because I think this is a topic we have not touched on the show. And I believe that there are parents out there that want to do the right thing and just need to know where to start. And so I think that this is a good way to get them at least on the right path.
Yes.
So thank you. If folks wanted to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
At boundlessawareness.com, Boundless Awareness LLC on LinkedIn. Feel free to contact me either way. We have a podcast, Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change. That's everywhere you get podcasts. We have a Substack. It's boundlessawareness.com. You can find all the resources there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. DEI After 5 is produced by the Leon Thomas Group. For more information, go to theleonthomasgroup.com.